we've had the paper Lament to Action, and it's now an opportunity for us as members of Synod to be briefed further on this. And I'm going to hand over to our Archdeacon Sue Groom, who's going to speak more about this. Before, I hope there'll be some opportunity for comments and questions. So, Sue, I can't see you, but I'm handing over to you. Good, I'm handing over to you then.
Thank you. Good morning, Synod. Good to be with you this morning. I've got beautiful sunshine here, which is very pleasant. I hope you have read both the report from the working group and the report from the National Church. The report from Lament to Action has lots of different recommendations, more than 40 recommendations, which we have looked at, but we're not going to talk about in detail this morning. One of the things that struck me particularly is that this report is the most recent in a long line of reports where the same recommendations have been made over and over again over the years, well over 100 recommendations, and not a lot has changed, which is very disappointing. Rather than go through the recommendations, what I wanted to do was to introduce you to, or ask Rahma Abbott to introduce herself to us and mention her role as she was appointed by Bishop Nicholas. And then I'm going to ask Jonathan Herbert, our chaplain to the Travellers, to update us on some of the issues currently facing the traveller community. And then we'll have a bit of time for discussion, and then I'll move the motions. So I'm hoping Rahma is with us. I know she's had technical issues this morning. Yes, there she is in her car. Welcome, Rahma.
Please tell me straight away if the sound is horrible. I'm aware the breakout room were incredibly tolerant of dreadful background noise earlier. When Lament to Action came out, Bishop Nicholas convened a small group of clergy who self-identified as having a heritage of some sort within that range. And out of that, I was asked to have a role which is primarily about supporting and enabling the voice of clergy who are UK minority ethnic, sometimes now known as global majority heritage, to express where their views are. It may be really helpful for people to know that I'm adopted, I have a mixed heritage that reflects the fact in South Africa under apartheid, relationships between people who were designated as being of different races, which of course they weren't, they were all human race, were illegal. But therefore I grew up without much access to that part of my background that is my minority ethnic sort of framework, which is very mixed indeed and includes those experiences of indentured labor and slavery, as well as being very privileged and, if you like, a majority privileged experience because I grew up in the UK. And I say that because my job is not to be an expert in what it means to be from a UK minority ethnic community or from the traveller community, but my job is to alert and encourage those who might share that and to make sure that we persist in being reminded about the importance of justice for discipleship, for mission, for ministry, for good pastoral care for all of us. I serve in a multiple parish rural benefice, and in Lynham over the last 18 months, we've had 2 families and 3 or 4 people join the church. And that reflects 2 things. 25% of the UK military are based in Wiltshire. And the UK military includes many people from Commonwealth countries who would fit exactly that brief. So we've had maybe 5 or 6 people and 1 family join the church during the last 18 months. And all of those are UK minority ethnic by 1, and that includes someone with a vocation. So this is an issue that really matters for us, because actually it is how the church will grow and develop, but also those people are here among us, even if you think they aren't. So I guess my role here is to encourage us to be disciples in terms of being willing to learn what we don't know. And that's hard because language changes, the politics around things changes, and we can feel very anxious about getting it right. But as with any learning, we don't have to worry about getting it right. We just have to want to make sure that justice is done. And anyone who's followed General Synod and heard Lord Boateng's words, or noticed that our brief is around, our passions around the environment and around reducing trafficking, those things will have an impact that's around ethnicity, race, people who are more able to be exploited, around war and justice. So it is something that will impact us all if we care about those things. And I'm sure that's more than my 2 minutes.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Rakma, and thank you. Now can I ask Jonathan to give us an update on the key issues affecting the traveller community at the moment. Thank you, Jonathan. Good to see you. Welcome to Diocesan Synod. You're muted, so you'll need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, great to be here. Greetings from Hillfield Priory. I'll try and screen share if I may. I'm giving an update on traveller chaplaincy. I've been chaplain now for 7 years. Chaplaincy isn't something new. The first chaplain to itinerant van dwellers in the Diocese of Salisbury was the Reverend Thomas Holt. He began in 1881. And we had 6 chaplains up until the First World War. And then the chaplaincy was lost and then revived in the Chalk Valley, initially by the Reverend Roger Redding in the early 2000s. My role as chaplain is in 3 parts really. Pastoral work, so meeting, visiting gypsies and travellers wherever they are. 70% of travellers live in houses now, 20% on private sites or in council-run sites. A small proportion, 2% plus, are on the road in unauthorised encampments. So yeah, 3 things. I visit people wherever they are. I visit people in prison too, at horse fairs, the Great Dorset Steam Fair. And then the second part of my role is advocacy work. So that's giving travellers a voice, speaking out for them, with them. And then thirdly, the third part of my work is educational. And that's not so much educating travellers, although I always encourage them to get back into education, but educating the wider community, because and particularly the churches, because there is huge ignorance about traveller culture. Here we have Jimmy Carr. He's a comedian, not somebody I've ever found particularly funny. There was a bit of an uproar this week because it came out that he told a joke on his show on Netflix talking about the Holocaust. And he said people don't know about the Roma and Sinti Holocaust. I mean, there were probably 500,000 Roma and Gypsies killed during the Holocaust. He said people don't know about it because people don't want to focus on the positive, which was an appalling racist thing to say. And a lot of my traveller friends will say that discrimination against travellers is the last form of acceptable racism. It's really something we must, I think, as a church be against. And of course, jokes lead to actions. It empowers violence. And if you're on the roadside as a traveller, you're very susceptible to being threatened, attacked. Here we have a picture of thank God it's not in Salisbury Diocese, that's actually in Shropshire, where the graffiti over a caravan. And I know people in Dorset who've been threatened with their caravan being burnt out and had windows smashed, and constant name calling and abuse from the roadside. What's desperately needed for travellers are are more sites, more safe places for people to go. Once you have a settled place, then you're not more likely to get access to education, which is vital for traveller children and young people. Also, you get access to healthcare. It's very hard to get planning permission if you try and if you buy your own land. On average, nationally, 10% of planning applications are refused. With gypsies and travellers, 90% are refused, which gives you some idea of those difficulties. I'm exploring with the diocese the idea of perhaps whether church land might be used for a permanent traveller site, which would give people that security which they lack. At the moment, the police crime courts and sentencing bill is, I think, still in the House of Lords, due to come back to the Commons, and it's very likely to make trespass for travellers, not for anybody else at the moment, but for travellers, a criminal offence. So, which will mean that travellers in an unauthorised encampment on the roadside will be liable to a fine of up to £2,500, 3 months in prison, or the confiscation of their homes. So that's causing huge anxiety amongst travellers, amongst people who are on the roadside. What's needed, I believe, are not more police powers, but more provision for travellers. Final slide. Anyone recognise that? The sanctuary knocker from Durham Cathedral, and in Durham Diocese they're pioneering a thing called sanctuary space for travellers, which seeks to respond to the criminalisation of trespass, which is almost certain to go through, by encouraging churches to find safe places for travellers to be. For example, allowing their car parks to be used for travellers to stay for limited periods, and being able to supply water, and in fact inviting travellers into the life of the church while they're there. 80% of Romany gypsies and Irish travellers would describe themselves as Christian, and actually Christianity is the link that will, break down that division. Just to end with a quote from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14. For Christ is our peace, who has made the two one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility.